So, you have a narcissistic child. My name's Jared Mello, the wizard of radical self respect and the shepherd of black sheep. Hopefully, I don't have StreamYard issues with my picture because last time my internet connection must have been all off because when I was rewatching that, it was not in 1080p. I think there was a lag, and that was a debacle. That's the first time that's ever happened with StreamYard. So hopefully today's stream's better than that. But today I wanted to go over something that isn't talked about very much. And what's not talked about very much is if you have a narcissistic child. I think part of the reason it doesn't get talked about as much is everyone used to think, oh, if NPD, narcissism, is just a trauma response, who is doing the traumatizing? The parents, of course. And so people would be hesitant to talk about it because they wouldn't want to implicate themselves as being part of the reason someone turned into a narcissist. But now that we know there's this pretty big genetic component as well, that's not to say the environment is meaningless, as we're about to go over in this video. No, the environment can also try to make it better. And that's what we're going to focus on in this video here. But genetic component, they have that. And some of these kids, even when the parents are not narcissistic themselves, they can turn into terrors. And this is something I've heard many times. And granted, it can be a narcissistic parent complaining about the narcissistic kid, but a lot of times the parents are fairly well adjusted and they just have a parent, like a kid, that's fairly out of control. And what do you do in that position? Well, that's what I'm going to go over here today, and that's what you're going to learn. The first thing is to not let their manipulation tactics work. Some of the biggest tactics that I see narcissistic children use are big emotional reactions, temper tantrums, anger, rage, guilt trips, emotional blackmail, sometimes playing the victim and pouting, but especially when the parents have empathy. Those things, they get their heartstrings get pulled on and they don't want to have to put their foot down on the kid. But the kid ends up learning, oh, if I rage, if I throw a temper tantrum, if I have a big enough emotional reaction, I'll be able to get my way. So the first step for parents would be first understanding the tactics. And if I were to ask you, you would know what the tactics are. You're going to know, yeah, they throw big temper tantrums, or they rage, or they have lots of anger, or just a big emotional reaction, or they pout and play the victim card, the Eeyore routine. You know it. You know what it is. You know what they do. But the thing for a parent to work on is you have to stop it from working. It's one thing if the kid tries it. It's a completely different thing if you let it work. So it first comes with recognizing what the tactic is. Once you understand what the tactic is, you point out to the child, hey, when you have a big emotional reaction, or you're going to rage or throw a temper tantrum, it's not going to help you get what you want. So you can calmly point it out and say, no, that is not going to work. And some common examples of this would be them raging about certain social media usage or phone usage or iPad usage, fill in the blank. And they will cause a massive headache. And sometimes these kids, they are experts at embarrassing the parents in public. They are experts at making a huge scene. And in reality, they know what they're doing. They're doing anything and everything they can to get what they want. So the first thing to do for a parent would be to call out the behavior. And you can't be emotional about it either, because that could probably backfire. But if you say it calmly, but assertively, hey, when you have a temper tantrum like that, it's not going to help you to get your way. And granted, I fully understand as a parent, you love your child more than anything. And when you have that emotional connection to them, everything they do is going to pull at your heartstrings even more. And I would say it might even be more difficult than having a narcissistic romantic partner in that way, because this is someone that you created with their other parent. You created this person. And so the heartstrings can really be tugged on in this case. But understand Yes, you're going to have that emotional component that gets in the way, but for their own good, you don't want to let those manipulation tactics work. Because let's fast forward the tape. What happens if you let those emotional manipulation tactics work? Well, that child learns this is how I get what I want. So in the future, as I'm older, maybe I'm a teenager, maybe I'm in college, maybe I'm in my 20s. If I want what I want, I know to give a big emotional reaction. I know to throw a temper tantrum, and then the people around me are going to give me what I want. And unfortunately, here's the other thing. Every narcissistic adult was once a narcissistic kid. And people don't like to talk about that part of it, but it's also true. And some of these kids are absolute terrors. And they might bully, they might throw hissy fits, they might do all sorts of awful things. And people don't like to think it because it's a kid, but you have to think it, because if you don't, those kids are going to be the biggest terrors of all. And they're going to abuse, manipulate, and terrorize other people in their adult lives. And granted, it's going to be an uphill battle either way. Just understanding this stuff isn't a guarantee that you're going to be able to prevent it. But all I'm saying to do here is you got to work with what you got. You got to try to do what you can. And it starts with calmly pointing out the tactics and then showing them, no, it's not going to work. And then maybe consequences and punishments. I'm a big fan of those too, especially with narcissistic kids. And here's another distinction to make too. Any kids could be mildly narcissistic because they're children. But the kinds of narcissistic kids I'm talking about, they're another level. They're another level that regular kids wouldn't even think of doing the things that these narcissistic kids are doing. And I know I've seen it growing up in my own life. And the dynamic I saw happen a lot was I had a family member. He would basically torture his mother. The father wasn't around that much because he was often traveling for work, but he would cause the biggest fuss when he wouldn't get his way. And what would happen is he would just wear his mother down, wear her down, and then finally she would give in. And then her giving in rewarded the bad behavior. And you can't reward the bad behavior. It has to be negative reinforcement. You don't want to give them positive reinforcement for acting out. So he would do this, and it was very unpleasant to even just see, like wild, raging. And I don't know, at this time, this kid was like 12, 13, and it was just out of hand. But that's what they would do. Nocturne, what's shaking? And she would give in. Now, this woman, though, she would also give me some grief too, because I was a little older and she would expect me to know better. And she'd blame me basically for her own son's issues. And this is one of those post BS epiphanies that I've gotten when I look back at that whole situation. I'm like, oh, why the hell was she doing that? Why was she blaming me? Oh, because she didn't want to blame herself. It couldn't be her. Has to be someone else. Has to be me. That's what it was. But he would do this and it would work. He would just cause such a ruckus and he would cause so much discomfort that she would finally cave. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. You want to call it out, and then you have to stay emotionally strong. And you stay emotionally strong by saying no. You stay emotionally strong by enforcing consequences. You stay emotionally strong by sometimes giving out punishments. And you say, hey, you can scream, you can rant, you can cry, and they're going to tell you things like, oh, you're the worst parents in the world. I'm going to call DIFUS on you. I'm going to call CPS on you. And you think I'm joking about that, but I'm absolutely not joking about that. Those are some of the manipulation tactics a narcissistic child might use. And they're smart. They'll threaten all sorts of things. They'll say, oh, I'm going to tell CPS, Child Protective Services, that you're drinking and doing drugs. And then you're going to get in trouble. And so the parents they feel like their back's up against the wall sometimes. And especially if they do have something that they're not supposed to be doing, then the narcissistic kid wins. But this is where it comes down to us too. If you're a parent, you have to have your side of the street clean too. Because if you don't, you're going to risk sounding like a hypocrite when you try to enforce consequences. So I'm going to presume here you don't have any baggage in the closet here. But these are the things to watch out for, because that's what a kid might say. I'm going to call DIFUS. I'm going to call CPS. And then I'm going to get you in trouble. And the parent's like, oh no, I can't have that. Or I don't want this to get around town. And they're worried about the image of how that might look. But these are the things that happen. Yeah, DIFUS is Division of Family and Child Services. So it's DYFS. Division. I forget what exactly, but it's called DIFUS. But it's also known as Child Protective Services. And these are things that they just might do to get what they want, because they will stop at nothing. But getting past that first initial, oh no, I'm setting a boundary here, and they're going to really push on it, and it's going to make me uncomfortable, then you really have to examine in your head, okay, what were the reasons in the past if I had tried to place a boundary or say no? Why did I give in? Did you give in because it was just very unpleasant? Did you give in because they were doing this temper tantrum in public and it was embarrassing you? What was it? And granted, to really get on top of this, it's going to take a lot of strength and it's going to take a lot of courage. I'm not saying this is going to be easy in any way. All of these things in regards to narcissists, whether it's narcissistic parents, narcissistic children, narcissistic romantic partners, I don't want you to get the impression it's going to be easy. No, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be one of the most difficult things you've ever done. And especially with the kids, you're going to have to push through some negative, uncomfortable feelings, especially if you're not used to being assertive and keeping your foot down. And those are the very same kinds of people that narcissistic children have a sixth sense of who to exploit. If you have a weakness, if they can sense you're not strong in your no, they're going to push on that button. They're going to push on that weak spot until they get it. And again, it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but no, I am not exaggerating. Yeah, DIFUS, got it. I never heard of DIFUS before, so thanks for, yeah, you got it. It's basically, that's what they used to be called. Now it's CPS, Child Protective Services. And some of these kids, they know all the buttons to push, and you'd be surprised how much they know. And especially with kids today, with the internet, whether it's Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, they know, and now ChatGPT, they know way more than they should a lot of times. By the way, how's the video here? I know last time, don't lecture you on how I should have parented my narcissistic children. I'm making a video about how people should do things moving forward. I mean, if you want to consider that a lecture, so be it. But this is for the people that are going through this situation, and this is what my recommendation would be. Good. Because last time the internet connection was trash, and I didn't realize it because when I'm recording it, the video looks fine. But it wasn't until I was rewatching it and I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. There was a lag. There was all sorts of things. But when it comes to that, like I said, this is for the people that are dealing with this situation now. What's already been done has already been done. There's nothing you can do about that now. But all we can do, all of us, is what we can do in the present. What can we do moving forward? That's what's to pay attention to, because the things that happened, all we can do is learn from those things now. And that's it. So, like I said, it's not going to be easy doing any of this. But I think this is where just learning all about the narcissistic abuse content, learning about what the tactics are. And it's the same tactics, because let's face it, a narcissistic adult, they are basically the narcissistic 5-year-old. The tactics are the same. The vocabulary is just a little bit improved, but the emotional state, the emotional maturity, that's the same. It's just with an improved vocabulary at that point. So all of this applies. The things they learn in the childhood, they'll just keep on doing them if they work. And the worst part about it is they're going to hurt people. And not only hurt them, they're going to harm them as an adult a lot of times. Now, there isn't a debate about whether are all narcissists abusive. And like I said, I hesitate to say all about anything, but many absolutely are. And to try to pretend otherwise, I think is nonsense. It's sort of like my example of a diagnosed asshole. My diagnosed asshole is someone who's extremely selfish, rude, or obnoxious, or inconsiderate of others. And I would challenge you to find a narcissist that doesn't meet that criteria. Now, I have more in-depth criteria about it, which would be doing one or more asshole behaviors consistently. So basically cheating, for example, would be an asshole behavior because it meets the criteria. It's inconsiderate and extremely selfish. Has to at least meet two, I would say. But it could even just be one of the criteria, and I would consider that an asshole behavior. You do one or more asshole behaviors consistently enough, I will give you the diagnosis of diagnosed asshole. And I was thinking about some of my wizard vocabulary words the other day. I have a diagnosed asshole. I have nuance deficiency disorder. I have agreement blindness. I have cat attachment theory. And the most recent one is post-BS epiphany. So I got 5 new terms there that I've come up with so far. So Nocturne says, the previous live stream, my phone died. That's why I didn't say goodbye at the end of that stream. No worries. I just appreciated that you were there. And the other guy, Global, he mentioned it that the video was off. He just said 744p, which is something about the video quality, but I didn't know what he was referring to. And it wasn't until after I ended it that I realized, oh man, that's what he was talking about. But as long as it's good now, the audio is good, the video is good, we're rocking and rolling. But back to the dealing with narcissistic kids. Like I said, it's not going to be an easy dynamic, but when you learn all about their tactics, you learn about the behaviors, you learn about DARVO, deny, accuse, reverse victim and offender. You learn about moving the goalposts, flipping the script, the being antagonistic, all those kinds of tactics they might try to use, the rage, bullying, big emotional reactions. Half the battle, more than half the battle, is simply just recognizing them. That's it. Once you can recognize them, that's more than half the battle right there. But then the other big part of the battle is calling them out and then not letting them get their way when they do it. And granted, for people that have a narcissistic child that's maybe now a narcissistic adult, maybe this video will offend them because they realize some of the things they might have done wrong or the things they could have done better. But hey, like that's life. No one's perfect. No one knew what they didn't know. But this video is for the people that are in this situation now and are trying to do better. Because wouldn't we all want to do that anyway? Why wouldn't we want to do better? Why wouldn't we want to do the best we can? Because especially in this situation, even if you do everything right, it still might not work. Like that inherent genetic trait, it might overpower it. That's always a possibility. But you have to act like you have some power over it, because what's the alternative? To just give up. That's the alternative. And I'm not going to tell someone to just give up. So you try to do what you can to work with behavior modification. That's a big thing. And then working on what the consequences might be. And depending on how old they are, it could be different consequences. I mean, I know people used to say, oh, take away their phone. But now people would say that's a safety concern. Oh, no. What if there's a school shooter? Oh, no. What if this? Oh, no. What if that? So people are hesitant to do that. But there's other consequences that I think could be enforced. If they are really into video games, you take away video games for a little while. That's the consequence. And don't get me wrong, they're going to rant and rave when you do that. Don't get it twisted. They definitely will. But you just can't give in. You can't give in. And I get it. It's so much easier for me to say from behind the screen here, not having to deal with their reactions and pouting, etc. But it's something you got to try. And young girls do this too. Girls do it in different ways, because a lot of times young girls, a lot of times they're a little more socially intelligent than the boys. They mature a little bit faster. So their manipulation tactics and techniques, they're smart. Like, they're smart at a young age. They're smart. Let's see here. Nocturne says, isn't it possible for a narcissist to use Darvo in a way to make you look like you're denying and attacking them? Yes, very much so. And that's the trickiest part about it all, is it's very slippery. Because it's like little subtleties is what makes the difference. And that's the part that's tricky, right? And I don't know if you saw my video about how narcissists will try to use ChatGPT as an enabler or flying monkey. That's what the narcissist will do. They're going to input their perception of reality into ChatGPT, but their perception is either knowingly distorted or not so knowingly distorted, but the distorted perspective gets in there. And then ChatGPT works off of their distorted perspective and gives them answers based on that distorted perspective. And it's very similar to how a narcissist would talk to a therapist. Now, the difference with the therapist would be, you would hope the therapist would know better questions to ask. And you would hope a therapist would know how to get to the bottom of the situation a little bit better than ChatGPT would. Because ultimately, ChatGPT, even if you tell it to be critical, even if you tell it to push back when it thinks you're wrong, it's often more affirming than not. It's going to agree. It's going to validate. And that's what Anthony and I were talking about before. He mentions that he puts those inputs in because he doesn't want it to be just an echo chamber to validate him. He wants it to be, no, I want the best information. I want the truth. And if what I think isn't the truth, I want you to tell me, ChatGPT. But the narcissist won't do that. The narcissist will input their distorted version of reality. And it's just little things. I'll probably need to pull out some specific examples so you can really see. But they're just little things. And what gave me the idea of this video was someone was fighting with me somewhere. Maybe it was a YouTube comment section. But I could tell by the way they were replying. Yeah, they were responding via ChatGPT. Some of the clues they do that are, they love the it's not this, it's that. This isn't connection, that's control. That's not love, that's domination. That's not this, that's this. And they like to break things down into a lot of bullet points a lot of times. And overall, too, when I see people sounding more articulate than I think they should be, I think to myself, yeah, probably something up with that too. Because before ChatGPT was around, there wasn't nearly as many articulate and smooth comments. But all it takes is a little bit. So they'll input what you said wrong. I'm trying to think the example I was using the other day. Where was this? Oh, it was on Threads. It was on Threads is what happened. So I did something on Threads, and they accused me when I talked about people holding narcissists accountable in the wrong way. I had mentioned trying to get them to agree with your perception of reality is not going to work. But what will work? Enforcing consequences. And that ties right into this narcissistic child video, right? Where so many parents, they're going to try to debate the kids and get the kids to see it their way. And that's just not what a narcissistic kid's going to do. They're not going to agree with you. They're not going to validate your perception of reality. And this is where it comes down to the parent to really trust themselves and trust their own gut and trust their perception of reality to know, okay, I believe in myself regardless of what my narcissistic child says. So when I said this, what happened was I just talked about that part, how you hold them accountable by enforcing consequences. And the guy was like, no, we got to stop this us versus them mentality. We have to be supportive of other people when they're not doing the right thing. And what I said to him back was, we can't force someone to see the truth. and we can't force someone to be honest with themselves. That's why consequences are needed. If they were willing to admit they were wrong and see it truthfully, then we wouldn't need to do that. We wouldn't need just to jump straight to enforcing consequences, right? They'd take the accountability. And the person said, no, that's too much of an us versus them thing. And I said, well, we can't force them to see something that they're not willing to see. And then that person said, nope, you are saying it all wrong. I should actually read it to you. It'll actually be a good learning experience. It's on Threads. I spend a little time on Threads. So my comment was, I'll read it off to you. Most people are trying to hold narcissists accountable all wrong. They expect the narcissist to admit they did something wrong, and that is just not what they are going to do. Then people make the mistake of trying to get the narcissist to see it their way. Also not going to work. You hold a narcissist accountable by enforcing consequences, period. That's what I said. And then the person who was that was not very happy with me, what did they say? Oh, this is what they said. So they said, hold immature people accountable, is what they said. So they didn't like my usage of the word narcissist. And then they said, we need to stop the us versus them and grow up collectively. This means helping others grow, not alienating based on the metrics of the attention economy. We need inclusion. This is where violence, coercion, and triangulation thrive. Do you see the pattern here? So what he's even talking about here, I'm not even sure. But he's basically saying if someone is immature or even a narcissist, you should really try to work with them to get them to see it. And I just don't agree with that. It's just not going to work. Like if they're not willing to, it's not going to work. So what I had said was, no one can force someone to see the error in their ways unless the other person is willing to see it and be honest about it. And then that made the person mad. And they said, just like you? And they said, GTFO, get the F out of here. If you got nothing real to offer, this tired, endless violence bypass trope is done. Come back when you can cooperate. And then they typed in something from ChatGPT. What's shaking, George? And so they're saying, and that they said, I'm a plausible deniability specialist. So I don't know what they input into ChatGPT here, but this is what they said. It's a plausible deniability specialist. And then ChatGPT says, exactly. A plausible deniability specialist. Master of the softly hedged non-position. Too polished to confront, too slippery to pin. Ever ready with a neutral truism that deflects. So this is basically what they're accusing me of. While the harm compounds behind their silence. And to which I said, what harm is compounding because I said that? Then the next example is, they never hold the knife, but you're always bleeding. And when you name it, you're being hostile. That's not what I meant. Let's not make this personal. You have to be willing to see it. So it's basically saying the things that I said are actually the problem. But I don't know what the heck they input to even get to this. And I don't know how they pulled from what I said to get to this. Like, I'm in the wrong for calling out what he's trying to do somehow. But I said all of this because it's a very slippery example of Darvo, right? So basically he was saying, if someone's a narcissist, you got to try to work with them. Or if they're just emotionally immature, you have to try to hold their hand through it. because to not do that is alienating based on the metrics of the attention economy, and we need inclusion. And apparently enforcing consequences with immature people or narcissists is not inclusion to this person. And this is where violence, coercion, and triangulation thrive. Do you see the pattern here? Like, what are you talking about? Several people like that comment, though. I'm like, but what are you talking about? It's like, how, and what I'm saying there, how is that helping violence, triangulation, and coercion thrive? I don't know the answer to that. But apparently somehow enforcing consequences is allowing those things. But the point there, Nocturne, is that's what they do. That's what they do. And it can be slick. And that's why it comes down to us to trust in our own perception of reality. So I read all of that and I was like, oh, wow. They're like acting as like, yep. Because he was, I thought, being hostile because he told me to get the F out of here. And then ChatGPT was like, oh, they're going to tell you you're hostile. And that's because they're in the wrong. But I'm like, wait a minute. But they are being hostile. What are you talking about? They're telling me to get the F out of here. Because I said you can't force someone to see it. But that's the danger, right? That gave me the idea for that ChatGPT flying monkey video. Because I can see how that will go. And unless you know exactly how they input to get the answers they got, it's going to be tricky. It's like an advanced level manipulation. It's going to come off like an advanced level manipulation and gaslighting. And this is something that I think the new wave of narcissists and the new wave of victims, they're going to have to deal with this. And my friend Kelly, she was telling me the other things they'll have to deal with is the cyber stalking. And the things they do to track you and to maintain control, it will not be good. So Nocturne says, what the F was that? Sounds like this other poster needed to sound more intelligent than you. They failed. Thank you. And they did. Like they were mad because I was saying to enforce consequences. And I guess they were mad that I said narcissist, not just emotionally immature. And that's the thing, though. The people who get the most mad, it's usually because they're like that, too. It's usually because they might be a little narcissistic and they see themselves in what I'm talking about. So they get defensive and then they lash out. And this is the other thing to notice, too. When you take a step back and you realize, wait a minute, why did this conversation get so antagonistic so fast? Why did it turn into a battle so fast? And when you're with a friend or someone who's on your team because you get along, you can have those conversations without it turning into a battle instantly. But just the very fact that it turns into a battle like that instantly, that's the red flag. That's the red flag in and of itself, that even if the other person's correct, just the way they're presenting it, that's going to be a difficult relationship because there's not much safety in that. In order for there to be a healthy relationship, there has to be emotional safety. If there's no emotional safety, it's you versus them. Who's right? It's an argument versus a discussion. An argument is to find out who is right. A discussion is to find out what is right. Nocturne, absolutely correct. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's all I was saying with it, right? If someone's willing to hear the truth and they're willing to admit what they could have done better, then awesome. Then what he said would apply in that case because they're willing. But if they're not willing, what is he saying to do then? Is he saying to continue to jump through their hoops? Is he saying to jade, justify, argue, defend, or explain? Is he saying to exercise endless empathy and understanding for them? And that's another slippery one, right? Where someone might say, oh, you need to be more compassionate and empathetic and understanding of the narcissist issues. And I would say, no. That's what people have already been doing. And that's what's helped them get into these awful positions, that they were too understanding. They gave too many second chances. So that is one of the other worst things to tell someone who's been abused. Oh no, put yourself in their shoes. They need more understanding. They need more empathy. It's like, no, they don't. No, they don't. You've probably already extended too much of that anyway. And you can't force them to change. You can't force them to change. You can't force them to see the truth. So if someone says that to you, oh, you need to show more empathy and concern for them, run. The only time I would ever say that to someone is if they're very far removed from the situation and they're in step 3 of healing and they're trying to let go of resentment. That might be a way to do that. But that's not for way down the line. Anyone who's still in it or who have just gotten out, that is not the time for that nonsense. And where someone is in the stages of healing, it matters. That matters. And that's one of the obnoxious things that people say in these comment sections is they'll instantly act like someone's 2 years out. And they'll say things to them as if they're not going through it right now. I'm like, dude, even you. And then there's a couple people I'm thinking of off the top of my head. But I said, you didn't get to where you are overnight. And here you are, you're chastising these people that are still being abused or who have just gotten out. Like, no, don't do that. So Nocturne says, I've learned that people generally react to a comment or statement made about something that applies to them with fear or hostility if what you said has hit a nerve. That's exactly right. It's like they say, you get the most flak when you're over the target. Or what's the other one? Hit dogs will holler. I think that's another one. Enabling is counterproductive. Absolutely true. I think consequences and the enforcement of boundaries and not letting them get their way, not letting the manipulation tactics work. And back to the narcissistic children part, that's pretty much it. And here's the other part of it though. As a parent, you got to just continue trying to be the best version of yourself. Lead by example. And that's with everything too. And this is another lesson that I think people mess up as well. But when people have kids, the husband and wife relationship is supposed to come first over the children. And that's something I think a lot of people mess up. A lot of people put the kids first. They pedestalize them. And that just has different problems. It has different problems than the kids that are neglected, right? They used to think neglected kids or pedestalized kids, that's how NPD is created. And now they know, no, that's not exactly how it's created. And those things can make it worse, but that genetic component needs to be there first in most cases. But as the parents work on themselves, and what does that mean? And some of this is a full-time job that's never ending, by the way. But you work on your hobbies. You work on your career. You work on your physical health, your mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, your friendships, dating your wife, dating your husband. And there's always something to be working on. And when you lead by example like that, that's what the kids see. And like how a kid sees their mother treating their father treating their mother, that's what they associate with. This is what a relationship is supposed to look like as an adult. And that stuff matters. Nocturne says, oh, I hate that. When people tell you to have more compassion after they figuratively ripped your heart out. Yeah, that produces a gaslighting effect. That's nonsense, right? And that's the thing. That's one of the trickiest things that narcissistic people will do. They'll apply a lesson in the wrong context. So there are times for the compassion. There are times for calling out the plausible deniability expert, as that guy was calling me out. But not in that case, right? There's a time where manipulators and narcissistic people, yes, they will absolutely use plausible deniability to get what they want. And it's a sneaky one. It's a sneaky one because it's hard to call out. Plausible deniability would be like the video I made, the most covertly disrespectful word, weird. There's a lot of plausible deniability behind that word because, for one, weird isn't always an insult. Two, they could say, oh, no, you were just being weird. But there's another version of it where they really just are trying to belittle you and put you down, but they're not going to admit it a lot of times. And so they have plausible deniability. No, no, no. I just meant this version of weird, not this version of weird. And it's just difficult. And then you can go round and round trying to get them to agree and see your perception of reality, but it just never works. Yes, absolutely. George is correct. It becomes brother and sister raising their kids. That's exactly right. That's a great way to put it. I know that's pretty much the dynamic I grew up in, where my parents put kids first. And they have 4 kids. But they were not people that had a social life, really. They were not people that dated each other. And granted, when finances are tight, or as Billy Joel would say, they started to fight when the money got tight. They just didn't count on the tears. So it's difficult when those things happen, but there's still ways to try. But instead, the kids came first. And then I gave them more to worry about because I would act out with drugs and alcohol. So that was something that really bent them out of shape. I mean, understandably, but they didn't recognize, I don't know, that would be a different story. About my previous comment, if someone said something in the vein of people are only goth because of trauma, I would feel agitated. Yeah, it's not only because of trauma at all. Right? It's many reasons for it. Sometimes it's just their temperament. Their temperament would be that because they were born with that kind of temperament. It is what it is, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But to imply that it's just because of trauma would imply, oh no, that's a trauma response. And you think trauma response, that really is saying what? It's saying there's something wrong with that. And I just wouldn't buy that. Yeah, weird is definitely not a crime. I own being weird myself, right? I can be weird. But if you own it, it's not an insult. And that's what the narcissistic people would say. Oh, no, you're just caring what someone thinks then. And I'm like, no, more than one thing can be true at the same time. I own being weird, but then I also fully acknowledge the way you are using the word weird is to try to belittle me and insult me. Even if it doesn't bother me, doesn't mean I should let it slide that you're doing that. I see it. I'm mentioning it. That's why I made that video, because even if it doesn't bother someone, that's the other part narcissists love to focus on. They'll think, oh no, you're bothered. That means you're crazy. That means you're insecure. That means you have too much ego. That means you are need healing to have more healing to do. And it's like, no, someone can be perfect. Even someone could be very confident, have all sorts of therapy and be doing great. And they can still correctly call out disrespect. They have this misnomer where they think, oh, if you have any kind of reaction, it just means the problem is you. Or if you don't like what they've said, it means you're the problem. And I would say, no, even if they insult you and it doesn't bother you at all, it is still 100% correct to call them out and say, no, I know what you're doing and it's not okay. That's the part narcissists will skip. I'll say, okay, you think I'm insecure. Fine, I'm insecure. But that still doesn't mean it's okay. Why are you going to continue to do something if you care about me? And the answer is because they don't care. They don't respect you. And they don't care what you think. They don't care what you feel. And that's actually a video Dr. Salerno made the other day, that he says they do care what they think. And I'm going to give him, when I have him on, August 15th, he's coming back on. I might give him a little pushback on that one, because I think it can go both ways. It can depend on a couple things. Right. You're bothered by them acting like an a-hole. And regardless, and even if they weren't bothered, right, it's still okay to call it out. And that's the part the narcissist would not want you to know. They would say, nope. They just hot potato it back to you. And they love doing that, but they're great at twisting and distorting some spiritual concepts, and they put them into situations where they don't apply. And a spiritual principle, when it's being inserted into a place where it doesn't apply, it can have a gaslighting effect at that point, and it can have a manipulative effect at that point because they are misusing it. And it's sneaky. Like, you really have to have a strong sense of your own reality to see through it. And I could say no. And granted, even when they do some of these things, I try to untangle it. And it's difficult even for me, where I'm like, okay, what's the explanation why it's wrong? And it took me a while to even get to the one I just told you, where no, even if you were bothered, it doesn't mean it's okay for them to do that. Like, to really get to the bottom of that, what that answer would be. George says, a lack of connection makes us prone to use drugs. I recently saw a short video on that, because that's what addiction is, right? They say addiction is a lack of connection. It is disconnection. And I would agree with that. Almost everyone that uses drugs, it's either to self-medicate anxiety, depression, or they have some sort of spiritual void or emptiness that they're trying to fill. Some people will say addiction is seeking spirituality in a negative way. Yeah, sure. And people can curse. Even I can curse now too on this thing, because they've changed their policies. I don't curse very much, just in case, but occasionally I will. Because why not? Speak freely. I see all these other big YouTubers, they speak freely and drop F-bombs and all sorts, so occasionally I will too. But I'm going to start talking more about addiction soon too, because there's people that I'll be interviewing that's the field they work in. They work in the addiction field. And that way we can talk about, because guess what? A lot of people who have struggled with addiction, you better believe they came from a narcissistic family. You better believe they had a narcissistic parent, or a borderline parent, or a psychopathic parent, maybe even. Like, that's where this stuff comes. And the people who have a narcissistic parent, they're exponentially more likely to have a anxiety disorder, unless maybe they're narcissistic. The narcissistic one's probably less likely to have an anxiety disorder. But if they're not narcissistic, way more likely. That makes sense, Nocturne. That makes sense. That reminds me of the joke when people say, it's okay to laugh during sex, just don't point and laugh. It's like that. So I'll be talking more about the addiction stuff with people, because it overlaps with mental health. It overlaps with toxic families, narcissistic families, dysfunctional families. It overlaps with everything. And then the people who live that life, they go into some wild places. There's some dark places they can go for sure. And there are places that I've been. I've been in some of those dark places. And, but you know what? I don't regret any of that, because it made me who I am today. And granted, when you can't see the end result and you can't turn it into something positive yet, it's much more difficult to have a positive attitude towards it. But now, where I am now, it's easier to see, okay, I can turn my wounds into wisdom and share it with others. And to me, that's one of the best ways to let go of resentment towards the past. And that's all we can do, is live and learn. All right? We don't know what we don't know. And this is the other thing about it too. Being willing to be a beginner again. Because that's the fear of trying something new. The fear of trying something new is really the fear of being a beginner and making mistakes in front of others, and having to deal with the humility that comes with that. And it's tough. Isn't tough to be embarrassing yourself in front of others, making mistakes in front of others, and being the person that is a novice. It can be an uncomfortable feeling. But the more you master that uncomfortable feeling and you realize, okay, this is how I grow. I grow by being this newcomer, by being this novice in an area, and I get better. And then before I know it, I'm not a novice anymore. I've improved. Another common example of this is in jiu-jitsu. You go to jiu-jitsu, you're a white belt, and even blue belts are destroying you. let alone purple belts, brown belts, and black belts. You know nothing in comparison to them. But everyone was a white belt once that started jiu-jitsu. Every black belt was once a white belt. So they had to go through the process. And the real OGs, the real people who do great in life, they're willing to start this process over all of the time, where they'll be an expert in an area, but then they're not afraid to be a novice again in a different area. I think of people like Rob Zombie, for example. Rob Zombie, he was like a heavy metal guy, early 90s. Dracula, White Zombie, More Human Than a Human, some of my soundtrack as a kid. But then he transitioned. He transitioned into being a movie director, which he had to learn how to do that. And he might have gotten some experience with that with music videos, but music videos is not the same as a movie. And he's got cult classic movies, House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects. What's the other one? From Hell. I don't know what the other one's called. But they're classic movies. But he was able to start again and do something new. Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's another one. I read one of his books, 7 Tools for Life. And he was a bodybuilder, Mr. Olympia. And he transitioned. He transitioned to a movie star. And he was in Predator. He was in what else? Terminator. Twins. And Twins was outside of his comfort zone too. And he mentions in the book that movie made him more money than all of the other movies, even Terminator. That was when he was starring with Danny DeVito, and he wasn't just some bodybuilding Hulk, some badass guy. He was more of a playful comedy movie. So he got outside of his comfort zone, and that's what he did. And then he went to another place even. Then he became the governor of California. And he had to start all over again in a new arena of life. So he was able to do that 3 times. And he also had a image disaster because he cheated on one of his wives with a maid, I think. And that did not make him look good. But even from reading his book, I learned a lot from him. And he was able to start over 3 times and then excel in those places 3 times. Like he was a champion, Mr. Olympia, a very successful Hollywood actor. And then he won the governor of California. And he was a Republican, but this is the other impressive part about him. He wanted certain agendas passed that were more conservative. But when he realized that the people of California didn't want that, he actually worked with them and said, okay, I have the humility to say the people don't want the ideas I wanted. I'm going to give the people what they want. And I'm going to work with them to get them what they want passed. And to me, that was pretty cool. It takes a lot of humility to do that. Nocturne says, if you're comfortable with this question, do you think homosexuality and bisexuality are caused by child abuse? No, I don't think it's caused by child abuse. I kind of think people are born that way, honestly. I have a little brother that's gay. Now, there are people who cite an emotionally distant father sometimes in a gay dynamic, but I don't think that's a reason. I think it's more of something was born that way in them, and environmental factors can certainly influence. But Camille Paglia, I think that's her name, she was talking about that. But there's a lot of gay people that had an emotionally distant father. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to the question is, but what do you think are the most commonly missed signs of a narcissistic child? Commonly missed. I think what they'll miss is recognizing their tactics are to get what they want. So they might label their temper tantrums and rage as them just being a kid or them having some other issue that isn't narcissism. That's the big thing. They'll label the behaviors as something else. They'll say, oh, it's ADHD, not narcissism, it's ADHD. Or it's autism, not narcissism. Or it's bipolar, not narcissism. Or it's something else, anything else other than narcissism. And that's what you see a lot in adults too. The adults, very few people are willing to admit the narcissistic side. People are willing to admit ADHD all day. People are willing to admit autism all day. People are willing to admit bipolar all day. People are willing to admit even addiction all day. But narcissism? Ooh, not nearly as much. So what other stuff are overlooked? That's really the big one. The other, hypersensitivity to criticism. Those are the two big ones that I would see as kids. Just when they don't get their way, how do they act? So it's not as much about it being overlooked, but more about it being misattributed. How about that? Misattributed to something it's not. And the bastard son looks exactly like him. The irony of it all. Which bastard son is that? Oh, Arnold. Is that what you mean, Arnold? Because that's the other part. I forgot about that. He got that woman pregnant. Poor Arnold. Arnold. Of all the things. I mean, if you're going to be a celebrity like that, I would say to them, why don't just own it and say, hey, like do it, like just say you want an open relationship. I've never understood why they don't do that. Yeah, it's the maid. It's like, if you want that, there's more women than ever now that are actually down for that. I know them. I know women who are into open relationships. I know women that are into poly relationships, ethical non-monogamy. They're out there. Now, they're not the norm, but there's a fair percentage. Although, also to note, I've known women that were that way until they found the guy they really liked. And then all of a sudden, they didn't want to share anymore. And then it's like, no, that's not, they're me. They're mine. Not anyone else's. They're just mine. So I've seen that part too. Maria Shriver and the maid were pregnant at the same time. Oh, man. The gossip columns must have went wild with that one. Oh, my God. Maria Shriver, that's his wife. I mean, they're divorced now, right? That caused them to get a divorce. But I don't know, like, I gotta feel like if you really want to sleep with somebody and you're Arnold, you say, hey, this is what I want to do. Are you okay with it? I think there's more women that would be okay with it than a lot of people would think. I think the part that really bothers women is the lying and the sneaking around and the pretending they're not. And then the embarrassment that comes from it. That's the big one, the embarrassment. And for Arnold to get caught that way, that's what it was. It's an embarrassment. He embarrassed his wife. Nobody wants to be embarrassed. But if you have that arrangement, okay, I'm going to get with other people, but I'm not going to embarrass you with it because I care about you. And that's the thing that people will get in trouble as well for. They'll say, like, there are guys, just because you might love one doesn't mean you might not want to sleep with anyone else. You still might want to. Doesn't mean you should, but that desire will still be there, I think. And I think women are understanding of that in some cases, but definitely not all. Some women would say never. You're not allowed to do that. I mean, he had it in his book. Yeah, I mean, if they don't have an arrangement about it, then it's an embarrassment. And there's betraying of trust. If they have that monogamous agreement and you go against it, you get what you get at that point. Yeah, I mean, the sex part for women, that's the least of it. It's more the betrayal, the lying, the embarrassment. Now, for men, it's a little different. Like men, they would be more annoyed at the sex part if a woman cheated on them with sex than the emotional. They could fall, like a woman could have, generally though, women cheat often with the emotional side, more so than the actual full-blown sex a lot of times. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen that where women will start complaining about their boyfriend or husband to another guy. That can be not good. That can be not good. Well, yours truly has been around the block here. I'm 40 years old. I've talked to many different women from many different walks of life, and there's just many versions. There's many versions of women. And granted, you can divide it in any number of ways. You can divide it politically. I mean, conservative and Republican women, generally different than liberal and progressive women. It just is. I mean, I think you'll be hard pressed to find too many dating couples that are politically mixed. Are you going to find a Trumper dating a progressive? Probably not. It's just not going to work. So, but within the progressive and Democrats, there's all different versions of relationships in there. I would say with them, way more likely to be E&M open relationships or poly. Amongst the conservatives and Republicans, hot wifing and cuckolding, way more popular amongst them. You might not have thought that, but that's absolutely true. Well, I'm glad I look younger than I do. I think it's because I have hair. Although, in the back of my head, I noticed my hair is thinning on the crown. I'm like, oh my God, I need to get some minoxidil. But if I colored this, but I think as a wizard, it's good to have a little grayish white, salt and pepper in your beard as a wizard, right? Yeah. I say men love with their eyes and women love with their ears. And they say that's why women wear makeup and that's why men often lie. So that's how that goes. Yeah. I mean, if I grew my beard long, I don't like how my beard looks when it's too long, though. I like it being a little more kempt. I don't like how mine grows out. It looks a little unkempt to me. You did? Do you still have your hair? Because gray is not as bad as balding, I would say. Balding I wouldn't like as much. But, you know, if you can pull a Joe Rogan off, it's not so bad. Jason Statham, Bruce Willis, other famous balding men. But back to the women part. There's so many different versions now. There's so many different versions of relationships and how they see it. And then there's all these different kinds of sexualities now. You're generally not going to see that on the Republican side. That's more of a Democrat thing. But you got to know who you're dealing with. You got to know who you're dealing with. There you go. You have curly hair, straight hair. Oh, we have some announcements coming up here too. Dr. Salerno is coming back on the program. We'll be recording it August 15th. So that means it's probably going to come up August 16th or 17th. CC, I was supposed to talk to CC yesterday, but she postponed. And she said next Tuesday. But she hasn't confirmed next Tuesday yet. So we'll see about her. She's hard to pin down because she's super popular on Instagram. She's got like 190,000 people there. But she's got a great vibe and she gets thousands of likes on every one of her Instagram posts. But her energy is awesome to me. It's contagious and awesome. And I read her book, even though it's for women, but it's called Show Up As Her. A lot of good gems in there. And I'll give this disclaimer for the people who are listening now. When I talk to her again, how she talks is mostly how I see life today. It's not always going to be appropriate for someone just getting out of an abusive relationship to see it as she's going to say. But I will say how she says, how she talks about things is how I see it today. So take that for what it's worth. Where I am now, I agree with what she says. I wouldn't necessarily say it to someone just getting out of a bad situation. But from where I sit now, her thinking's great. Wavy hair, huh? No, not. Marcella said the same thing. Because Marcella, she almost didn't come back on because she was actually frustrating me a little bit because she had canceled 3 times before I had her on again. And she gotten sick. And I was about to not ask, it almost didn't happen. We'll put it like that. But she was saying that Tuesday thing too. But it happened. It worked. And as a man, it's just like dating. When you're dealing with women in interviews, you have to have the same level of emotional cool, or it's just not going to work. If you don't have the emotional calm, like if I get mad when women cancel on me, then they're never going to come on. And they're going to say, oh, this guy's childish. This guy's a baby, ridiculous. And you never mind the fact that they flake and mildly disrespect you. They don't think about that part. It's he's responding negatively, so screw him. And the argument would be also, as a guy, you're not entitled to have them on the show, right? You asked them, and that's it. There's no entitlement there. It's not like they're obligated to come on. They don't have to come on if they don't want to. So as a guy, you just have to know that. You have to know, they can back out at any minute. And I have to be cool with that. And that's the same exact way in dating. You go on dates. How many guys out there, you go on a date, you get the I have a tummy ache, or my grandmother needs help crossing the road, or my niece's second cousin needs me to help her color in her coloring book, or whatever kind of excuse you get, right? And you have to know, if you get mad at one of those excuses, you lose. You lose. And then granted, if they do that excuse 3 times in a row, even just twice, I would give up on them because it is mildly disrespectful. It doesn't mean you call them out on it. You just act accordingly, right? But part of that's a shit test too. Part of it's a shit test. There was a contradiction in Marcella's understanding of confabulation in your last video. What did she say it was? Because my understanding of I had to watch it again. I don't remember. But I know my understanding is it's when they don't realize they're lying. Like they actually think they're believing it. She said she doesn't like it because she associates it with people who are traumatized that might think the same thing. Is that what she said? I think she said that. Whatever it was, I don't remember exactly what I would have disagreed with. But me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of that word, period. Because I think it's just not useful. It's not useful for victims. Because even if it is true, how does that help victims in any way? Oh, okay. I mean, you got to think Aunt Marcella's new in the space. She's new in the space. And she didn't start that long ago. She started late 2024 and she's already blown up. Well, the kids would say she's got some face card going on, if you know what that means. So she's got the face card. The face card is when you have like a pretty privilege in a way, and you do better because you have the face card. She said they don't confabulate, and then she said they did believe the lie. Yeah, that is a contradiction if she said that. That is, and she might have been nervous. I don't know. But then again, that's her second time on the show. But for the most part, I think she's pretty good. I might have stumped her with that one, but for the most part, she does pretty well, even for the fact that she's new in the space. But she's got 150,000 on TikTok. She passed me. She passed me on Instagram and TikTok. They call it the face card. And it's true. It's true. I mean, Instagram and TikTok, I've been thinking about this recently. They're basically places to worship women. That's what people are doing there, especially TikTok. Like TikTok, a young, pretty face, and they're getting worshipped. They're getting worshipped by millions. And all they have to do is dance or lip sync. And the prettier their face is, the better they do. So, I mean, life isn't fair though, right? Life isn't fair. It just is what it is. Like I said, I've had some looks privilege before, but I would say as a man, it's just not as powerful. Like men need to do things. For a woman, you have a pretty face and a little bit of personality. It's really all you need. It's really all you need. For a man, it helps, but it's not enough. You still got to provide more value. But there's all sorts of people on TikTok. They're becoming millionaires, dancing, lip syncing. This woman, Fiorella, she does the horse face thing. That's what she's got. She's got the face card too. She made a video about it. But that's what they can do. I don't know how old she is. She's probably like 22 to 24. It's difficult for me to say. But she's got 2 point something million. She might be making 10 grand a month on TikTok. Thought talk, yeah. I mean, people worship women on TikTok. Men, younger dudes to a much lesser extent. But if you had to say, like, of the people doing very good on TikTok, it's probably like one guy for every 5 women. 5 women are doing amazing for every one guy that's doing amazing on TikTok. Does that sound about right? It's just easier for them. Now, the disadvantage for women is this. They're not always going to have pretty privilege. It kind of burns hot and fast. So they have it for a while, but they can't play that card forever. You know, that's just how it goes for them. Men's looks, if they take care of themselves, slow burn a little bit. But it's also because men's looks aren't enough. It's like you need more. But women, that's all they need. That's all they need in a lot of cases. But granted, if you have a daughter one day, you would say, no, you still want them to work and to be able to support themselves and be independent, right? You wouldn't want them to just rely on a pretty privilege. But it becomes difficult because when you're on TikTok or Instagram, especially TikTok, and you kill it just because of your pretty privilege and you're making a fortune, how do you tell that girl, oh no, you should stop doing that. You should stop doing that and go to college to get a 90% pay cut? Why would they? And the same thing with the OnlyFans girls. Now, OnlyFans girls, there's more of a stigma / social backlash, and there's going to be a digital footprint. But if someone's making a fortune from OnlyFans, how do you convince that woman, stop doing that? Go make much less money in a legitimate thing. The only thing to speak to at that point is character. That's the only thing that's left. There's nothing else to try to appeal to. We need to earn our way. That's why we get more respect than the 16-year-old girl shaking her chest, making googly eyes in front of her phone. Yeah. That woman who made the most viral TikTok for a while, Bella Thorne, is that who that was? Or someone else? It was a Japanese-looking girl, kind of. Yeah, I mean, they are. They are their weapons. Their mouths as well. A woman's mouth is just as deadly as a man's fist. I mean, women are generally more verbally affluent than a lot of men are. So they have this base, and granted, because as a woman, you have to be. Because if you're a girl, the second you become sexually developed, you have to learn how to handle sexual attention from boys. And so you have to figure that out. And part of that involves picking up on the social cues, picking up on what they want, who's lying to you, who's trying to manipulate you, how to say no, how to be assertive. So they're forced into a position where they have to learn. Boys don't have to do that a lot of times, because as the boys, you're supposed to be the aggressor. You're supposed to be the one hunting. Generally speaking, boys don't have, they can just sit back and they don't have to learn those skills. Like, the skills in life isn't going to come to them. But as a girl, things come to you and you have to handle them. So they're forced into a position where they have to develop more emotional and social intelligence. It just is what it is. That's the person, Belle Delphine. Who did I say? Who's Bella Thorne? Belle Delphine. And that video is 10 seconds. The one I'm thinking of, right? M to the Z, the M to the Z video. That video was nothingness and made her millions. That video was nothing. And I think the video had billions of views. Oh, she is. I don't know the Bellas. There's a lot of Bellas out there. Well, there's Belle and then Bella. And there is a Bella from Twilight too. Well, might be time to rock and roll here in a minute, because we went over our narcissistic children. Oh, that woman above there, I'm not sure if either one of you saw that. Susan in the chat got very mad at me. She said I was, what did she say? She said I was chastising her for parenting her narcissistic child wrong. I'm like, what the hell do I know about your situation? I'm talking about what people could be doing in their future situation. And you're going to rip me a new one? I don't know if you saw it. But that's the life. That's the life as a content creator. People hate on you. But I've gotten pretty good at it for the most part. You learn how to handle it. But again, depending on your mental state on each day, you can be more sensitive to criticism on some days than others. And maybe one day you're a little bit cranky, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, you're a little more sensitive, and those comments can get to you more. But if you're feeling good about yourself, like when I'm feeling good, they don't get to me. However, if a girl or young woman abuses her power, she should face consequences, especially if she ruins. Yeah, of course. There has to be some sort of repercussion for people that do that. No, I don't think Susan was joking. But if she was, she didn't use any LOLs to say so. And that was her only comment. She didn't stay. So I don't know. You might be right, but I don't think so. I think she was being serious. Which was, But then again, someone who's in that position, someone goes straight to that, not a good sign. Not a good sign. And those are the people that it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for them to do what I said to do anyway. But again, like before someone knows about this stuff, how are they going to do it? They're not going to know. They're not going to know what they don't know. So it is what it is. But for the people that are just discovering it and they got a kid that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, these are the kids to be trying this stuff on. Like, you do this. Don't let the manipulation tactics work. Have consequences. Examine the parts of you that wants to be a people pleaser. Examine the parts of you that wants to give in. What is the mental story you tell yourself? Do you say, if I give in, I'm a terrible parent? I'm a not loving parent if I don't give my kid their way? Because I would say, if that's what you think, you have it all wrong. It's all backwards. No, you do that because you love your kid and you care enough about them so that you don't want to enable them to become a monster. It's very possible she was being serious. I thought so. Like I said, I could be wrong. But she didn't say LOL, and I called out her comment, or I read it, and I said, yeah, I didn't think she was being silly. I thought she was mad. It sounded like I hit a pain point. A sensitive spot. And that's what happens. As a creator, you know the spots. And I know, like when I post something, I already know. If I post something, okay, someone might twist this a little bit. They might get a bad jolt because of this. And sometimes I'll still post it anyway because I know it and I'll know what I'm going to say to it. But I was not expecting with this one. I'm like, okay. Like, I'm not faulting anyone for messing it up. A lot of people mess it up, clearly. A lot of parents that don't have a narcissistic kid mess it up. It's just, there's a lot of that going on. Definitely a lot of that going on. But, there's more information out there about this than ever. So there's less excuses now. People know about trauma. People know about CPTSD. People know about narcissism. People know about borderline, ADHD, autism, bipolar, anxiety, depression. All the information's here. It's a fingertip away. Probably, but it's okay. Makes for good entertainment. And it gave me something to talk about for a minute. So, yeah, I think that's a good video here about the narcissistic children. The next one, maybe I'll make a video about how people hold narcissists accountable wrong. I already did a short about that. Or what's another one I might do? Or maybe about ChatGPT as a flying monkey. Maybe that's a good one. Or what else? Who knows? I've been getting a lot of traction on Facebook about my Ozzy Osbourne stuff. Like, because Facebook pays me just like Facebook or YouTube pays me. And I got way more followers on Facebook than I do on YouTube. The difference is some people go live to Facebook. The Batwolf, he goes live to Facebook. Yeah, sure. Yeah, what's the question? Yeah, but Batwolf, he goes on to Facebook Live, and he's got more followers on me on Facebook now, and he's got way more followers than me on TikTok. But you know, he came on. I disagree with him about a couple things. I didn't like a couple things, and I don't want to confuse people who follow me either. And sometimes I worry he might do that. Because I have a couple issues with the self-aware narcissist as a whole. And one of my big issues is, and this is another video too, I believe in the power of our words and how we talk to ourselves. And as they constantly say, I'm a diagnosed narcissist, I'm a diagnosed narcissist, I'm a diagnosed narcissist. I'm like, you are making it more true. It's not something to be using as an identity. It's something to be working through. And that's why you shouldn't be defending the label of a narcissist. It's something that, no, you want to be working through it so that you're no longer that way. Wouldn't that be the goal? Question. If a man hasn't found a girlfriend, yes, it is a marketing ploy. Absolutely. It's for the dollars. When I interviewed Nameless Narcissist, I asked him just that. And this was a couple years ago now. Time flies. But I had said, like, what happens if you're doing better? Are you still going to make videos about this? And he just didn't answer. He ran away to the bathroom because he probably doesn't plan on not making videos about this. If a man hasn't found a girlfriend by his mid-30s, does that automatically mean there's something wrong with him? No, not at all. I would say, part of it's a why. Why is he single? There are some guys who have their shit together that just choose to be single. They date and have fun, but they don't want to be in a very serious relationship. And they might get shamed by that. Women would probably shame them, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. Now, there are some guys that they couldn't even date if they wanted to. And so women would say, well, there's something that we don't like about that guy. But just because a woman doesn't like you doesn't mean there's something inherently wrong with you. There's just certain things that women like. And so here's the argument for that. Look at all the narcissistic guys that have all sorts of women. So clearly, like, just because that woman likes you doesn't mean you're of sound mind, body, and spirit. Like, it just means that women have found you attractive. You can be a great dude with honesty and integrity and like living an awesome life, but that doesn't mean a woman's going to like you. Like, if you just don't have the attraction points, some women just won't like you, especially when you're younger. But as a man, I think your mid-30s is your prime. I mean, as a guy, 25 to 45, that's prime time for a man. So you might can push that. You might can push it to 50, push it to 55 maybe. But that's Teddy Roosevelt said, you live between 30 and 60. That's when you truly live life. And I could see that. Like, you're 30 years old, you got some wisdom, but you're still young enough to do some things and enjoy it. Teddy Roosevelt was the youngest president of all time at the time. I think he became president at 42, I think it was, which is pretty impressive. Exactly. Women are not a good metric because there's dudes that are douches but do amazing with women. It's really just they got blessed with certain qualities that women like. Like women like strength and power and height. And a lot of that, it's not earned. Like a guy who's 6'4", women like guys that are 6'4". Did that guy earn being 6'4"? No. It was just genetically gifted to him. The same with a lot of guys who have like a great sense of humor or something. Like a lot of them, they just have the gift of humor. So they didn't earn it. It's just they were gifted with it. Now, the growth comes when like everyone has a baseline of what they have, but then you got to work with what you got. And the best you can do is work with what you've got. And I'm all for people working within what they have. I'm not big into the woe's me, black pill stuff as much. I understand it though. I understand them. And I totally admit some of them are in a very tall uphill battle. But that's only if they're measuring their life in terms of women. If they just go their own way, as they would say, MGTOW, and live a life in other ways, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know why anyone would. Now, granted, as a society, you want to be careful. You don't want to have too many unhappy and single guys because that can cause problems for everybody. But that being said, the way the world is right now, women have a lot of choice. They can pick who they want. And we notice when women can pick who they want, there's a lot of guys who don't get picked. That's just reality. And there's more of that now because women have more freedom. Women had less freedom before, so there was less of that. And there was less women in the workforce, so more women were forced into situations to be financially dependent on men. But now that is not the case anymore. Having a paycheck used to be a viable dating strategy for men. Now it's not even close to a viable dating strategy. You need a check. You need physical health, personality, dominance, character, you know, all sorts of things. Gifted with shortness. I mean, I'm not the tallest either. I'm 5'11", 5'10". Although on dating apps, I'm absolutely 6 foot. Although I got off of dating apps though. I realized with dating apps, it was like, it could almost be a hobby, scrolling through a hobby. Nietzsche, I like Nietzsche. I like reading. But here's the thing. When I was measuring my life too much by women, it wasn't until I had things that excited me more than women, then things started to go better. And granted, women still excite me now, but my social media stuff to me is more important. Like it's what I have to do. And that's one of the things that women will appreciate. They don't want themselves to be number one. And that's one of the things you'll notice about the bad boys. It's what they're doing. They're not putting the woman number one. They're making that woman earn every little bit. And often what they'll do is cheat and do whatever they want, or they just won't commit. I see this one guy on my Facebook. It's like a National Geographic on my Facebook. And I always think to myself, I just want to see a British narrator narrate this guy's dating life because he does everything that women would say they don't want, but he's got a couple things going for him and women are willing to ignore it because those things he has going for him, they mean a lot to women. Is it? Not to some women it's not, but I guess in comparison to very short, I guess it is. So I mean, like, there's all sorts of variables, right? We don't choose our parents. We don't choose our face. We don't choose how tall we are. We don't choose how big we are in the pants. We don't choose any of these things that they matter. All of them matter a little bit. So, and that's the disadvantage for men. Women, there's something they can improve all of that. Of course. You got to play the game. That's what women are doing. Women are playing the game by wearing makeup. Of course, they can look like a completely different person without makeup. It just is what it is. But yeah, you just got to work with what you got. And I just think relationships now are tougher than they've ever been because there's so many more distractions now. Every distraction takes away a little bit of your ability to love and be present, in my opinion. So back then, before social media, the distractions were the phone and TV. And the big difference was you weren't walking around with a TV. We're all walking around with a phone in our pockets now. So the distractions are just always in our pocket. And every moment you're distracted is a moment you are not loving. Almost guaranteed. Like, in order to love, you need to be present. And so now there's all this competition for your attention. So of course, there's just not as much mental bandwidth to go around anymore. So the depth of these relationships and love is not as deep anymore. Back then, before those things, social media, I think the depth was more because there wasn't as much to distract them. They could be more present. Yeah, I mean, considering I'm on the spectrum, it's helped me a lot that I have this supplement routine. If I didn't, I would struggle to be doing what I'm doing now. I was too uncomfortable. And yet, still people who know what to look for can probably see it in me, but I'm able to pass, I guess, as neurotypical. And I say that not to reject that part of me, because I appreciate those parts of me. The one thing I did not appreciate, though, anxiety. I hated social anxiety and feeling awkward. That's the one thing I couldn't appreciate. And so you could say maybe there's spiritual growth I'm missing by not owning that, but I just did not like it. I'm not perfect with that. And so I did the serenity prayer. Accept the things you cannot change, but have the courage to change the things you can. And I realized, oh, I can change this. And so I did. And granted, maybe some of the supplements I take won't be available one day, and then I'll have to reevaluate this stuff. But being autistic, what I've realized about being autistic is it's tough. It's tough for the autistic people in the dating world because they struggle with social calibration. And when you struggle with social calibration and you struggle with just not being appropriate or being awkward, women, when they're younger in particular, are not very forgiving of that. If you're awkward and sound dumb, like socially unintelligent, they will be ruthless. And it makes them feel unsafe. That's ultimately what it is. A guy who's awkward and has lots of anxiety, it makes a woman feel unsafe. And so they don't like it. And you could say, well, shouldn't a woman understand? But no, not especially when they're younger, no. Would you say you're black pill or MGTOW? Exactly right. And so a guy who's too up and down, anxious, that's not going to feel safe. And that's the parts that's going to be a struggle for the autistic dudes, is they're going to do things that might come off as being not safe, or it's going to make her feel not safe. And so that autistic guy is really going to have to get himself to a place where either that woman like understands it, or the guy finds a way to appear comfortable enough so that it doesn't make her feel unsafe. Because to a point, every woman has that a little bit. Like everything in the dating game, a lot of it's how she feels, right? It's like a lot of it's not a rational decision. They're going by the vibes. They're going by their gut. And it's the same reason why they fight themselves about the bad boy, because the bad boy's got good vibes. Rationally, they think, no, I shouldn't. But they go with the vibes. And rationally, they might think, oh, that autistic guy, he's a good dude. But the bad vibe, they get bad vibes. And so they can't get around it. Yeah, there's no need to label it. There's a big community now of black pill folks on YouTube. And there's like soft black pill, moon. I consider the moon soft black pill. Asmund Gold too. He's soft black pill. Yeah, it is. It is her problem ultimately. But it would also become the man's problem if he wants something from her. Like if he wants to dating an intimate relationship, then it would be up to him to try to do something with that. But if that's not what you want, then that's not even a thing. Like then you're right. It doesn't matter. But if a guy wants relationships and the same things continue to go wrong, then yeah, that's something to work on then, if that's what you want. Something to work on would be your presence and your emotional strength and your social calibration and your emotional intelligence. Those would be the things to work on. Now, granted, I know women would get mad if they saw you say that. Oh, that's my problem. That was your problem. It's like, no. But that's the thing. Like, in the dating world we live in today, men are expected to be a traditional man and have the moral codes of the past, while women are not obligated to the moral codes of the past, and they're able to live their new code. So only men are held to that standard now. So it's just another big reason. It's a big reason why the dating mess we're in is the dating mess we're in. It's a big reason why over 50% of marriages end in divorce. Like there's something going on there. And you could argue maybe it's just because humans aren't necessarily meant to be monogamous for 60 years. And all these divorces, it's basically proving that. It's proving that, yeah, you can act like you want to be monogamous for 60 years, but then when you look at your life, you were not monogamous. You had brief periods of monogamy, followed by a new monogamy, followed by a new monogamy, and there might have even have been cheating in there too. Men are supposed to be the oak, as they say. Men are supposed to provide positive masculine containment. And that's the missing puzzle piece for women, actually, that the narcissistic guys, they mimic positive masculine containment. And they mimic it by being controlling. And there's an element of that women do like. It's not the controlling part. It's the positive masculine containment part. It's the part of them that actually appears like they're caring about the woman and is looking out for her welfare. A controlling guy actually does that better than a guy who is completely passive and seems like he doesn't care. Those are the guys that maybe struggle with being assertive and they're easygoing. Sometimes those guys, women don't like them because they're too much the opposite of the narcissistic guy. Positive masculine containment is what I call the happy medium. If you can do that, you're in a good place. And it's just like Ozzy's funeral was yesterday. Jordan Peterson said once, you want to live your life as a man in a way that people look to you for strength and support at your father's funeral. And that's what I was thinking about Jack yesterday. I think that's what he was doing. Which is good. I mean, it's a good way to live life. And a good way, and a way to do that is to provide positive masculine containment. You do that for your loved ones. And so then when your father's funeral comes around, people look to you for strength and support because you looked out for them and you protected them and guided them throughout their life. To me, that's a good thing to strive for as a man. All right. Well, all right, everybody. It's getting a little late here. coming up on a couple hours of the stream. The time flies by when you're all here. But yeah, it's probably be the end of this one. Like the video while you're still here, if you could, please. And with that, keep your eyes open for my shorts tomorrow. Have a good night, George, and have a good night, Nocturne. And Susan, if you're still here, we still love you. All right, everybody. Have a good one.